Charlie Sheen in The Rookie. Angelica Houston and John Cusack are mother and son con artists in The Grifters. And Johnny Depp plays a very unusual teenager in Edward Scissorhands. It's all coming up next on Siskel and Ebert.
Really getting a lot of hot water for this.
Relax, kid. Take your mind off my work. Think about that little squeeze that you had at your daddy's bash the other night.
Hey, you just shut up about her, all right?
Clint Eastwood and Charlie Sheen are mismatched cop partners trying to bust a chop shop operation in The Rookie. It's one of the new holiday movies we'll be reviewing this week on Siskel and Ebert, along with the new film by the director of Batman. I'm Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune.
And I'm Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times. Clint Eastwood's new movie is named The Rookie, and somehow, even from the title, I think we sort of get the idea this movie is not going to be a dazzling burst of originality. The formula has been used over and over and over again. The veteran cop whose partner is killed, and then he gets hitched up with a rookie. In fact, Eastwood has made this movie on at least 2 previous occasions, once with Tyne Daly. The movie stars Eastwood as a cop assigned to the auto theft division, where he has a vendetta against a slick operation that steals luxury cars for chop shops.
Who's up front in the cab?
Santa Claus.
And I'm the Tooth Fairy.
Charlie Sheen co-stars in the movie as Eastwood's new partner. They have the usual hot and cold relationship in which some days they hate each other and other days they'll die for one another. Sheen doesn't bring much energy to this role.
Don't patronize me. And I hate the way you drive. And I hate your stinking whiskey breath.
I'm giving you one last chance. You do as I say or the pig dies.
Raul Julia co-stars in the movie. He's a chop shop millionaire, but he also seems to be sleepwalking through the film and doesn't make much of a memorable villain. His girlfriend, played by Sonia Braga, carries a machine gun and acts tough, but like most of the other characters, she seems to be all behavior and no personality. There are some spectacular stunts in the movie which give Eastwood a chance for his specialty, the deadpan one-liner.
Passenger seatbelt. Engineered like no other car.
Now, that's a scene as sensational as some of the stuff in Die Hard 2, but somehow the humor undermines it there, so it doesn't deliver as much impact. The Rookie is a disappointment coming from Clint Eastwood, who directed it and usually knows how to make an efficient action picture. The thing that's missing in this movie is conviction. Sure, the plots are retread, and sure, most of the situations are silly setups, but if the actors really care about what's happening, you can get away with a lot in an action picture. Not this time. Nobody in the movie seemed to really care much about anybody else, and there was no chemistry at all between Eastwood and Sheen as the partners. Everybody seemed to be just going along through the motions.
Yeah, it's a very depressing experience. Everyone's wasted in the film. The Latino stereotypes when they get out on the street are just awful. I think what's obvious is that Clint Eastwood, in the last year, had a 2-picture deal with Warner Brothers, and this is the payoff for making what we thought was a very good film, White Hunter, Black Heart. But why did he have to pay him off with such a lackluster project? Why not have this be fun? At this stage in his career, he should have fun spoofing, if you will, some of the cop buddy pictures.
When you look at the film, there are so many really elaborate special effects setups and so many elaborate and difficult chases that maybe all the energy went into doing that stuff, and the back and forth things are just perfunctory. In particular, I really didn't think that Charlie Sheen had it in this picture in terms of
Nobody has
playing a role that so many other people have played better, the rookie cop who's trying to prove himself.
But nobody has a good role. Raul Julia's wasted. Sonia Braga is
wasted.
tawdry. She, you know, this was going to be a classy international star. It's a joke. Okay, next movie, and this one is special. I mean, when did you last see Huey Newton, Ronald Reagan, and the Grateful Dead in the same movie? The film is a documentary featuring this unlikely cast of characters, and it's called Berkeley in the 60s. It focuses on the California college campus that was at the center of the American protest movement in the 60s. And what were the kids protesting against? As Marlon Brando said in The Wild One, what do you got? The protests at the University of California's Berkeley campus really took off when the school bosses banned students from distributing political literature at tables in front of campus halls. A sit-in developed when the police came to remove the protesting students.
Well, it wasn't the first time that I had been threatened with arrest. Two policemen took me under the arms. I went limp. They dragged me into the police car. And before I got into the police car, it was surrounded with people. It was 2 minutes to 12. There's this commotion going on. Some people are joining in. Some people are stopping to watch. This police car is going nowhere.
The leader of the free speech movement was a fiery orator named Mario Savio. Quite eloquent here, deriding the school management, which viewed itself as presiding over a giant corporate enterprise.
There's a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart, that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop.
A couple years later, in 1966, with protest in full flower, then gubernatorial candidate Ronald Reagan spoke out against the Berkeley campus ringleaders.
It began a year ago when the so-called free speech advocates, who in truth have no appreciation for freedom, were allowed to assault and humiliate the symbol of law and order of policemen on the campus, and that was the moment when the ringleaders should have been taken by the scruff of the neck and thrown out of the university once and for all.
This is no lighthearted romp through the 60s. It's a deadly serious, yet most entertaining documentary celebrating an extraordinary time when young people fought in their own way for First Amendment rights and then went on to fight for the civil rights of all Americans and, of course, battle against the war in Vietnam. The movie revisits the students some 25 years later, asks them to reflect back on those times, and when the film matches vintage footage of their student days with shots of them now in their 40s, talking today, we see that protest is really not a magical thing. It's an individual taking a risk, standing up when he or she is morally offended. There is a lot of vintage music in the movie, Joan Baez, Country Joe and the Fish, but the best music, the one that I'm really the most nostalgic for, is that of young people singing out for nothing less than what they think is right. It's a touching film.
I really love this film. And I like the way that it starts right at the beginning. It's all of Berkeley in the 60s, starting with protesters who are wearing neat little suits and ties, and then going through the flower power period, the hippie period, into Black Power and into the Black Panther movement, showing that Berkeley was kind of a microcosm of all of those social movements during that decade. And if you wanted to put together a film festival and put it in a time capsule as to what the 60s were really about, if you had this movie and Woodstock and a movie called The War at Home that we reviewed about protests at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, you'd have a real interesting document for people who don't understand what the 60s really were about.
The film is also tough on some of the protesters. It has some people, including blacks, who say that the Black Panther Party, with all of its guns, really polarized the movement there and disaffected a lot of people. And I like that aspect of the film, too.
One of the most surprising things is that they all seem to agree that the Black Panther Party was basically just a media event. I thought that was interesting. Angelica Houston and John Cusack are two generations of a low-life criminal family in The Grifters, which is coming up later in the show. Coming up next, Edward Scissorhands, a fable by the director of Batman about a boy with scissors for hands.
Oh, my.
Don't go.
What happened to you?
Edward Scissorhands is a young man who lives in that bleak Gothic castle on top of a mountain and has scissors for hands. He's discovered there one day by the Avon lady, played by Diane Wiest in that scene, and she brings him down from the mountain to live in a suburban neighborhood that looks like it was inspired by a comic strip. The neighborhood ladies gossip about the strange new visitor in Edward Scissorhands, which is a weird fantasy by Tim Burton, the man who directed Batman.
Don't you worry, Kisses, you're going to be just fine, honey. You're going to be so pretty. Yes, you are. Oh, Eddie, is there anything you can't do? You take my very breath away, I swear. Look at this.
That little boy was manufactured by a mad scientist up in the castle, played by Vincent Price, who died before he could give him real hands. Ebert is played in the film by Johnny Depp, and he falls in love with Diane Weist's daughter, played by Winona Ryder. Sometimes it seems like she's the only person in the world capable of loving him.
Hold me.
I can't.
Edward Scissorhands is being sold as kind of an offbeat Christmas fable about getting to love people who aren't exactly like you are. But I found the movie perverse and self-indulgent, the kind of project that's supposed to appeal to kids but actually only scares and disturbs them. I wish they devoted a little more love and imagination to the screenplay of this movie, which is a real no-brainer about Winona Ryder's boyfriend developing a grudge against Edward. The movie ends with a fight to the finish where one character dies, and that's how a lot of movies end these days, not with people working out their problems or getting to know each other, but with somebody getting killed, and death is the solution. I guess it's easier to write death than dialogue, and so the new motto is, better dead than said. Edward Scissorhands left me depressed and disturbed.
It didn't leave me depressed. I didn't think that the film had a good finish to it.
No.
It sets up this guy in a fabled, interesting world, and then he comes down to this pastel suburban parody, which, of course, we've seen before. And I think at its best, it tries to give us a character I suppose kids can identify with, because they always think they're flawed in some way. Yeah. And so his hands represent the...
He's the outsider.
Exactly. But all right, that's all set up. It's nicely done. You marvel at the way Johnny Depp manipulates his hands, and then there's really no payoff.
No.
There's really no payoff.
Well, it's the automatic pilot payoff. You have a bad guy come in who's just hateful for the convenience of the screenplay, and he starts pushing Edward around, and then they go back up to the castle, and they have a big fight. That's just, it shows a complete lack of a desire to really work out this situation and to come up with something creative. Yeah. And so many movies these days, I'm serious about this, especially kids' films, are teaching kids that the movie should end with a big fight and somebody gets killed, and that's the solution.
I didn't really see this as much of a kid film as you did. I mean, I felt this was made for me as much as for 10-year-olds, and I just wish that there had been a third act that was as interesting as the first two.
Fair enough. Coming up next, Angelica Houston and John Cusack are swindlers in the new thriller called The Grifters.
Lily, I make my own decisions for a long time now.
Working some angle, and don't tell me you're not, because I wrote the book.
You want to talk? You still running playback money for the mob?
That's me. That's who I am.
Angelica Houston and John Cusack are mother and son who are both small-time scam artists in The Grifters, a most disturbing psychological study of people living on the edge, always trying to cut corners, grabbing any opportunity for easy cash. The film is set in California in the uncertain near past, with John Cusack early on landing in a hospital after he's been beaten up by a bartender for trying to pull a scam. His mother, Angelica Houston, who runs bets for a mobster, visits him and gets angry at her son's floozy girlfriend, Annette Benning.
I'm Roy's friend.
Yes, I imagine you're lots of people's friend.
Oh, of course. Now that I see you in the light, you're plenty old enough to be Roy's mother.
Aren't we all?
Play nice, don't fight.
Later, Houston confronts her son. She wants him to get out of the grifter's life. She also is jealous because he loves that life more than he loves her.
You were never cut out for the rackets, Roy.
How come?
You aren't tough enough.
Not as tough as you, huh?
Angelica Houston also has trouble with her mob boss, played by Pat Hingle.
You're not skimming a thing, Lily?
Oh, well, you know, clip a buck here and a buck there. Not enough to notice.
That's right. Take a little, leave a little.
Person who don't look out for himself's too dumb to look out for anybody else. He's a liability. Right, Bobo?
That's 1,000% right, Lily.
Or else he's working an angle. If he's not stealing a little, he's stealing a lot.
You know it, Lily.
The Grifters is really two movies, an entertaining manual on how to cheat people, and much more interesting, a twisted love story between a mother and a son who trust no one and yet recognize the emotion of love for each other that is creeping at the edge of their hearts. And what I really like about this picture is that it doesn't try to sum up everything in a neat package. Rather, it simply presents some very specific lives at the fringe of society, people who are disturbed and unforgettable. The Grifters was directed by Stephen Frears, who's made 2 strong films about obsessed characters, Dangerous Liaisons and Prick Up Your Ears, and he is really building now an impressive body of work.
This is a terrific movie, and one of the things I liked about it as I was watching it is that, like House of Games, a movie we liked so much a couple of years ago, although it's totally different in style and in emotional content, it makes you think all the time because the characters are never necessarily doing what they want each other to think they're doing. So the audience has to get in the act and figure out who's on the level here, what's the angle, why is this being said, why is this being done, and there were a couple of times in the movie when I was really fooled. But even apart from that, you're right, it's 2 movies, and the other movie is even better, and that's this emotional triangle with these 3 great performances.
You know what? When you realize that everybody in this picture is scamming the other person, that really is a level of tension that we're not used to in pictures. We're used to having some outside force move the characters around and work toward a conclusion. This is a whole different game.
It's much smarter, it's much more clever, and the performances, Cusack, Houston, Benning, these are 3 Academy Award level performances. They're really terrific.
Very strong. The Grifters was based on a hard-boiled crime novel by a man named Jim Thomson, who has never been more popular than he is today, 13 years after his death. And we'll look at the mystery of Jim Thomson when we come back.
The Grifters, a movie with a great screenplay by Donald Westlake that was based on a novel by a man named Jim Thomson. And this is a rare piece of footage of Thomson, who played a bit part in the 1975 movie Farewell, My Lovely.
I have one of the finest collections in the world, but nothing's been stolen from me.
That's Jim Thomson right there. And all through his life, Thomson was a bit player, a writer who specialized in writing cheap crime stories for pulp magazines and obscure paperback houses. He wrote a lot of them, at least 29 novels, not to mention some screenplays, and he became famous for gritty, hard-edged dialogue. Was it great literature? Well, maybe not, but it was something authentic and special, and Jim Thomson had a voice of his own. Right now, 13 years after his death, no less than 3 movies are in release based on Thomson's books. After Dark, My Sweet is already opened, The Grifters is just now going into national release, and The Kill-Off opens in a limited release next week. 4 earlier movies, including Sam Peckinpah's The Getaway, were also based on his books, and he collaborated on 2 of Stanley Kubrick's best movies, Paths of Glory and The Killing. In these movies, the characters speak in Thomson's distinctive voice. Let's listen.
Do you think I'm crazy? I wouldn't jerk you, clown. Come on, clown, sing us a chorus from Pagliacci.
You talk the lingo. What's your pitch?
The long end, big con.
I apologize, sir, for not telling you sooner that you're a degenerate, sadistic old man. And you can go to hell before I apologize to you now or ever again.
You hold the short end of that old stick just so long, and then you're gonna want to start swinging it.
Shut up.
What?
I said shut up.
And that is good dialogue. Why should Jim Thomson suddenly be so popular, and why does Hollywood seem eager to make all of his books into movies? I think it's for a very simple reason, and that is that Thomson wrote about people. His plots were sometimes pretty shaky. He didn't care much about clever twists or customizing a story for a big star, but he got inside the minds and hearts of his characters and made them into individuals like those doomed people caught in the love-hate relationships of the Grifters. He understood guilt from the inside out. You pick up one of these books, you start to read, and you sense there's a juicy story there. Thomson was ignored during his lifetime, but today there don't seem to be very many writers around who are quite like him.
No, I mean, the level of screenplay writing today is really weak, and I think what people respond to is that there's a force in control. After Dark, My Sweet is a film that was not particularly successful at the box office.
No.
I think it's one of the best films of 1990, and in addition to seeing The Grifters, I really recommend that After Dark, My Sweet be seen when it comes out on home video.
I think The Grifters is also one of the best films of 1990, so Thomson's doing okay. Coming up next, our home video recommendation, a drama about some troubled souls in Brooklyn in the 50s.
New in video stores this week is the drama Last Exit to Brooklyn, a very strong dark tale about some working-class characters in Brooklyn in the 50s who haven't come to terms with their sexuality. Stephen Lang, in a terrific performance, stars as a union official who is confused about his homosexual tendencies. Jennifer Jason Leigh plays a young woman who turns to prostitution because she doesn't have any other personal strength. Both are poignant, tragic characters in a richly dramatic film that offers a view of the city as hell on earth. Obviously, Last Exit to Brooklyn is strong, R-rated stuff, hardly family viewing, but it is excellent for what it is. Now let's recap the movies we reviewed on this show. 2 thumbs down, way down, for Clint Eastwood's The Rookie, a thoroughly routine film about mismatched cop partners. You've seen this one before, many times before. 2 thumbs up for the documentary of protest called Berkeley in the 60s, revisiting a special time in American history. 2 thumbs down for Edward Scissorhands, Tim Burton's colorful but empty fable. I liked it a little bit more than Roger. 2 thumbs up for The Grifters, the very strong psychological study of people on the make. And Roger, you know what I said about Berkeley in the 60s, a special time in American history? You know, we lived during that time, and we don't think of it as in American history.
It was a long, long time.
It is.
You know, one thing about The Grifters, it's playing right now in New York and L.A. for Academy Award consideration. It's going to open around the country in January. That's it for this week. Next week, we'll be back with Havana, starring Robert Redford and Lena Olin.